this is Sandra from Greyd, and today I'd like to show you how to use Greyd.Forms to create an interactive form with mathematical calculations. From solar power system planner to an interest calculator, nearly anything is possible, and that way you can not only create a unique user experience, but also get very valuable website leads. Here, for example, I've got an annuity calculator where the user can select a duration and an interest rate and gets automatically displayed the costs per month and per year and can submit a web lead. So while we have a very appealing form in the front end, in the background even the most complex calculations can take place. So what do we need for that in the back end? You can work with the block mathematical field whenever you want to work with numbers and or calculations. You can either directly enter a number, or you will find here lots of different operators, and you can also include your form fields dynamically to create a calculation. For example, I could say I want my field property multiplied by the price per square meter. So as you can see, you can either directly type in here or use these field placeholders and or operators. Here on the right, you can then enter the name of your field, which is definitely important when you want to use that field later in another mathematical calculation. Also, if you want to submit this field in with the form entry to send it, for example, to your CRM. So instead of this automatic name, you can use a custom name, which will then also be visible as a dynamic placeholder. With these two checkboxes here, you can define whether or not you want to show the result and or the formula itself in the front end. Depending on what kind of calculation you're doing here, it might be interesting or important in the front end, but often it's also just relevant in the back end and doesn't have to appear in the front end. So that's why you can decide here. If you activate this checkbox here, you can change your field value depending on certain conditions. We'll have a look at that later. And on here, you can define how many decimal places your number or the result should have. And if you want to round off or up, automatically means that from 0.5 it will round off, up, and before that it will round off. As just explained, if you want to show the result, you can simply use this checkbox, but you won't find many styling options then. It looks different if you work, for example, with a heading or a text field and then implement your numbers as a dynamic field. Here it works exactly like dynamic text, just that here you only have your dynamic form values here. So much on this. So now let's get back to the conditions. If you've activated this checkbox here, you can add one or even more conditions here. For example, I could say, depending on how big the property selected is, the price should not be 200 euros, but maybe only 150 per square meter. So I can define a condition then if the property, in that case, is bigger than, let's say, 500 square meters, then I want the calculation be the same, but with the price per square meter of only 150. And one tip, even if your reference field is not a number like we have it here in our example, but for example, let's say a checkbox, since you may want to add broker costs if the checkbox is activated, you can also dynamically adapt your calculation with a little workaround. This is where conditional containers and hidden fields come into place. I will now create a conditional container and make it dependent on my broker checkbox and say it has the value on, and I then add a hidden field and give it the number, the value 1500. Then I copy the whole thing and define the condition for the checkbox is off. Then the value should be 0. And now I can use that here in my calculation. I can just add, I have to update one time. So now it should be here, yeah. Now I can add my broker box in the calculation. So when the checkbox is now activated, 1,500 will be added to my calculation. And if it's not activated, 0 will be added to my calculation. So much on the mathematical field. In forms with calculations, it's often a use case to have slider controls like this one here in your form. And we also have a dedicated block for that, which I've already included here in my form. Different to other form blocks, you have two labels here, one before and one after the value that's automatically inserted, like you can see here. That's very handy, especially if you want to work with units, for example. Other than that, you can work with the regular toolbar options. You can give your field a name, an individual one, which again is very helpful if you want to include that value later in mathematical calculations. You can define whether the field should be required or not, and then you can define the range of your slider control. By default, it's 0 to 50, but you can work with any values you'd like to have. For example, here 1 to 1,000 in steps of 10. And you can also define where the control should start when the page is loaded. You will then find some styling options for the label, font size and color, if applicable also with a hover effect. You can then define the size of the slider control itself in height and length, and also of the controller itself. You can make it bigger or smaller. And then you have this little box here where it automatically includes the value that's currently selected. Here again, you can change the size easily here. And as you've seen, you can also always work with different sizes per breakpoint. After that, you can change the border radius of the track, the controller and the box to make it more round or angular. And then you will find lots of color options for the track itself, for the active or selected part of the track, and both changeable for the moment when the slider control is used. And also for the box here, you can change background and text color. And last but not least, you can add like a help text if you want for the user, which will be visible behind such an info icon here. So much on the design and layout of slider controls and mathematical fields. Now, depending on what you want to do with that form on your website, it might be good to have a form that's an actual form that can be submitted and creates an entry, or it might be better to just use it for display reasons. For the latter, you'll find this option here below the form. You can make it a non-submittable form without a submit button, which of course also changes all these follow-up actions and emails, which are then not necessary anymore. For more videos and information, please visit our Help Center.